You wake up before sunrise. Not because you have to. Because your body already knows the light is coming. There is no alarm. There is no shift to clock into. There is no rent due at the end of the month. For most of the time humans have existed on this planet, this was simply what a morning was. Then something changed. And that change may have been the worst decision your ancestors ever made. About 12,000 years ago, in a handful of scattered regions across the globe, humans started planting seeds on purpose. Wheat in the Fertile Crescent. Rice in China. Maize in Mesoamerica. It happened slowly, then all at once. And it is taught, almost universally, as the moment humanity leveled up. The moment we left the cave and entered civilization. But what if that story is backwards? What if agriculture was not humanity's great leap forward, but its great trap? To understand why, you have to first understand what life looked like before it. Anthropologist Richard Lee spent the 1960s living among the Jew/Hoansi San people of the Kalahari Desert, one of the last surviving hunter-gatherer societies on Earth. He tracked exactly how many hours they spent finding food. The number surprised everyone. Around 15 hours a week. Not 15 hours a day. 15 hours a week. The rest of their time went to resting, socializing, storytelling, and childcare. Lee's research became part of a broader argument, one later popularized by anthropologist Marshall Solins, that foraging societies were, in his words, the original affluent society. Not because they had abundance of stuff. Because they had abundance of time, and very few unmet wants. Compare that to a farmer. A farmer wakes up and the field is waiting. It does not care if you are tired. It does not care if it rained too much or too little. Crops need weeding, watering, protecting from animals, harvesting at exactly the right moment, and storing before they rot. Farming is not a 15-hour-a-week job. It is closer to a 50 or 60-hour one, every single week, for your entire life. So the first trade humans made was time. But it was not the only one. The second trade was health. Anthropologist George Armalagos spent decades studying human skeletons pulled from the Dickson Mounds in Illinois, a site where people transitioned from hunting and gathering to farming corn. The skeletal record does not lie the way stories do. Before agriculture, people were taller, had stronger bones, and had fewer signs of disease. After agriculture, average height dropped. Tooth decay spiked, because grain-heavy diets are far worse for teeth than the varied wild diets that came before. Skeletons show more infections, more anemia, more evidence of chronic malnutrition. This was not an isolated case. Similar height and health declines after the shift to farming show up in skeletal remains across Europe, the Near East, and the Americas. Wild diets included dozens, sometimes hundreds, of different plants and animals across a year. A farmer's diet often narrowed down to one or two staple crops. If that crop failed, there was no backup. Foragers rarely starved. Farmers, again and again throughout history, did. Geographer and author Jared Diamond called agriculture, quite directly, the worst mistake in the history of the human race. Not framed as opinion. Framed as a conclusion drawn from the archaeological and skeletal evidence itself. So if farming made people work more and made them sicker, why did it spread across nearly every corner of the globe? Here is the twist. Agriculture did not win because it was better for individual humans. It won because it was better at producing more humans. A forager mother, constantly on the move, can really only carry and support one dependent child at a time. Hunter-gatherer populations were spaced out, deliberately, by years between births. A farming village, staying in one place with a stored grain surplus, could support far more children, born closer together. More children meant more hands to work the fields. More hands meant more food. More food meant even more children. It was not a lifestyle upgrade. It was a numbers game. And once one group had the numbers, they could outcompete, displace, or simply outbreed their forager neighbors for the same land. Agriculture did not spread because individual humans chose a better life. It spread the way a successful strategy spreads in nature, whether or not it makes any single participant happier. Now picture it directly. Reconstruct the scene. You are a farmer 9,000 years ago in the Fertile Crescent. It is midsummer. The wheat is nearly ready, but so is the risk. A hailstorm could flatten the field in an hour. Locusts could strip it in a day. You cannot leave to hunt or forage somewhere else, because this land, this exact plot, is now your entire livelihood. Your children are not playing in the shade. They are old enough to pull weeds, and they are already doing it, because the village cannot afford idle hands during growing season. When you finally harvest, you store what you can and pray it lasts through winter. If it does not, there is no fallback herd of wild animals to hunt. There is only hunger, and the neighboring village eyeing your fields. This was the new human condition. Chained to a place. Chained to a crop. Chained to a season that did not care about you. And there is one more cost that is easy to miss: privacy and freedom of movement essentially vanished. Foragers who disliked their group, or a bad leader, or a bad situation, could simply walk away and join another band. Farmers, tied to land and stored grain, mostly could not. Property, hierarchy, and the first real inequality between rich and poor households all show up in the archaeological record almost exactly alongside the first stored grain surpluses. Someone had to guard the surplus. Someone eventually decided they owned more of it than everyone else. Here is the part that should make you uncomfortable. You are still living inside that decision. The average person today works far more hours per year than a Kalahari forager did in the 1960s. James Sussman, an anthropologist who has spent years studying the Jew/Hoansi, has argued that the modern obsession with constant productivity, the guilt of sitting idle, the sense that time not spent working is time wasted, is not some ancient human instinct. It is a relatively recent invention, one that tightened its grip specifically as agricultural and later industrial economies demanded ever more structured labor from ever more people. You check messages after work because the field, in a sense, never stopped needing tending. You worry about savings the way a farmer worried about a grain store, because scarcity anxiety did not disappear when farming did. It just changed shape. You get a full night's sleep less often than your body evolved to expect, in a world your ancestors would find almost unrecognizable in its distance from what a body is actually built for. None of this means agriculture was pointless, or that it should be undone. It built cities, writing, medicine, and eventually, the very ability to study this trade-off in the first place. But it is worth being honest about what was paid for all of it. Farming did not simply arrive as a gift. It arrived as a bargain, one your ancestors were slowly, quietly locked into, generation by generation, until there was no walking back into the old life. So the next time you feel exhausted by a job that never seems to end, by a schedule that owns more of your day than you would like, remember this. You did not invent that feeling. You inherited it. It has been passed down for 12,000 years, ever since the first person looked at a wild field, and decided to plant it on purpose. You wake up before sunrise. Not because your body is ready. Because the alarm went off. And somewhere behind that sound is a decision made by people who never knew how long its consequences would last.